Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So let's try this again. My first connection didn't seem all that good. Good. I see myself moving and shaking. So as I said on the last video, I want to thank everyone who subscribes, thank everyone who likes the videos, thank everyone who shares. If you donate through Patreon or Super Cash, you are absolutely appreciated. You guys help keep this channel going. Thank you very much. That's the first part. Coming up on Monday, Hard Bastard will be here at 7 p.m. That show will be amazing. 7 p.m. Eastern. Hard Bastard leans further to the right, but that's perfectly okay. He deals with this thing of media, and we're probably going to have this conversation about whether... He did a video saying that Dora was suffering from cognitive dissonance. So we're going to talk about that. Guys, I'm sorry. I'm slightly stopped up this morning. We're doing an early morning show. And for whatever reason, my sinuses are being a little weird. But nevertheless, that's not going to stop me from doing the show. So let's hop across the pond, because there's fascinating stuff going on in the UK. Now, for the past year or so, they've been going through Brexit. And I've been covering the Brexit negotiations. And Brexit hit his head on this wall of the Irish border. What are they going to do about the Irish border? Are they going to have a hard border? Theresa May is given this kind of, they call it the Narnia approach, which the UK, which the EU has fundamentally rejected. And they've halted talks until they come to some conclusion on that. In the meantime, a Russian spy and his daughter were poisoned. They're currently in the hospital. Theresa May comes out in a blazer, gorgeous blazer. I love her blazers. You know, I love powerful women. And condemns Russia with this condemnatory tone that Moscow did it. Russia was the culprit. Looks like my connection is flaky. God damn it. Yeah, she comes out and condemns Moscow as the culprit of this crime. Now, and what she says, to be specific, Moscow is likely the culprit. Somewhere between that day that she comes out and said they're likely the culprit, and the next day, Moscow is now absolutely the culprit. They're the people responsible. They did it. We're changing our policy and we're expelling diplomats. And that's what they did. They kicked out diplomats. My connection is flaky. Guys, I'm going to do this video and I'm just going to upload it because it seems like my connection is not doing well. It's going in and out again. Well, what's up? Yeah, let's try it. Alright, so she kicked out diplomats. Now, this is massively hyperbolic. They haven't even had an investigation. I did the videos the other day saying, where's the evidence? Where's the beef? Where's the actual thing that you can point your hand to say, yes, they are absolutely the culprit. They absolutely did this. They jumped to conclusions. Now, Jeremy Corbyn had somewhat of a rational approach, saying we need to get in the body, the international body that deals with these particular things, into the investigation. They joked Jeremy Corbyn. They said that he's not standing up for Britain, and they outright attacked him. The Blairites stuck their heads up and attacked Jeremy Corbyn. Mind you, the Blairites are the same people that got Britain into the Iraq War, where they didn't have mass destruction, where they did kill 1 million people, and where the British society was fundamentally against it. Tony Blair should be in prison, and yet you still have his Blairites running around being neocons. Jeremy Corbyn's approach was rational. France came out saying, we're looking for definitive evidence before we take a position. We don't do fantasy politics. France has taken a reasonable, balanced position. The United States, we have maniacs in office. Not so much. And before that, this guy. An important point. Russia can meddle in our elections or poison people on the streets because we let it. And we let Russia do this because we're so deeply divided with some politicians. Trump in the United States, Corbyn in the UK, Schroeder in Germany. Corbyn in the UK what? Corbyn in the UK what? How is he in this conversation with Trump? At which point did waiting for the results of an investigation become being complicit with Russia. You don't know it's Russia. You don't know anything. You haven't even had an investigation. You literally jumped to the conclusion. They've jumped the shark from likely to definitively. That's insanity. They did this within the course of a day. That's the first point. I have a message to the people of the UK, by the way. Let's keep going. Nikki Haley, our maniac
that's at the UN. No two nations enjoy a stronger bond than that of the United States and the United Kingdom.
Yeah, this maniac. Haley calls for UN action over atrocious poisoning of ex-Russian spy in the UK. United States ambassador and maniac to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, called Wednesday for the Security Council to take action against Russia over poisoning of a former spy and his daughter, labeling the attack as an atrocious crime. You haven't had an investigation. You haven't had an investigation. What am I missing? Honestly, explain to me. What am I missing? There has been no investigation. They've jumped the shark to Russia did this. I was looking over. I've done videos on this for the past week or so because I thought this was amazing. I've had help. Jimmy Dore has finally come into this also. So I saw he made a video about it. That's great. There should be more talk on the anti-war side of this. Of, wait a minute, you haven't had an investigation. That seems the most rational thing in the world. Take a look at this. Russia has said they're going to expel British diplomats over this. British diplomats to be expelled from Moscow in retaliation, Russia ambassador says. Now, this is the timeline of events. May says Corbyn spokesman Iraq Salisbury weapon mass destruction comparison is wrong and outrageous because he's right. There are weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. There are weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. The newspapers, there are weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. TV show hosts, there are weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Politicians, there are weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Saddam Hussein was throwing babies out of incubators. Do you remember this? This is what took place here. Weapons of mass destruction. There were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. The newspapers were wrong. The politicians were wrong. Colin Powell and his 80% approval rating was wrong. All of those people were wrong. They lied. They magnificently lied. And your government agreed to this. I'm talking to the British government. Your government agreed with this. Tony Blair latched on to this and took your British soldiers into a country for no fucking reason. Ultimately, your soldiers died for no reason. Your soldiers were killing Iraqis for no reason. They lied to you. They magnificently lied to you. Now, she's coming up with this thing of, it's highly likely that Moscow did this. Why would you, after that experience, automatically take anything that the government is telling you is true without any evidence to make sure that what the government is telling you is true? You have only her word for it. What Russia has asked for, what Jeremy Corbyn is asking for, what France is asking for, is an investigation. That's the most common sense thing in the world. They are moving you along a particular path, in this kind of neoconish path, without actually getting evidence to back up their case. Do you remember back in the United States, back in 2001? I don't necessarily do WikiLeaks, Wikipedia, as a source of information. If I need something that's very basic, just a general idea of Wikipedia is fine. I don't use them for main details. But in this case, I just want the general case itself. The 2001 anthrax attacks, also known as Amerithrax, from its Federal Bureau of Investigation case, occurred within the United States over the course of several weeks beginning September 18, 2001, 1 week after September 11 attacks. Letters containing anthrax spores were mailed to several news media offices and 2 Democratic senators, killing 5 people and infecting 17 others. According to the FBI, the ensuing investigation became one of the largest and most complex cases in the history of law enforcement. A major focus early in the investigation was bioweapons expert Stephen Hatafil, who was eventually exonerated. Another suspect, Bruce Edwards Ivans, became a focus of an investigation around April 4, 2005. Ivans was a scientist who worked for the government biodefense labs in Fort Dix. My point is, When this case took place, the first thought was, this is Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda is attacking the United States. Al-Qaeda is coming after us. They're coming to get us. In one case after the next, one guy they called exonerated, another guy exonerated. They jumped to the conclusions on who it was, and they were wrong. You guys have just had something that started. The guy was poisoned. They looked at whatever it was, whoever the government is using as their scientists, and they said it was a particular poison. Great. That's your word for it. If you're going to blame somebody else, in any case or court of law, they wouldn't necessarily purely take the word of the person who was, I guess, who was hurt in that case as being the word of God. They would flag that and raise that to other international bodies so other people can see the proof of what you're using to blame somebody else for it. Now, if you're saying that it is a chemical that Russia's makes, or that's made in Russia, okay, you should be able to prove that, and you should be able to show that to the court of law, or at the very least some kind of international body to affirm the results that you're coming up with. Right now, it is just your word for it. I am making the point that no other country should just take Britain's word for this and move forward on this. The United States is going through a Russia hysteria at the moment. Extreme Russia hysteria. But understand that Russia hysteria is purely politically motivated. These people are maniacs. Their candidate lost an election and they don't want to deal with the candidate losing the election. The candidate that lost the election back as early as 2015 came up with an idea to tar Donald Trump with Russia because Donald Trump wanted to be conciliatory towards Russia. It is political theater in the United States. In the UK, you have a populist revolt. That populist revolt is being run, or the avatar of the will of that populist revolt is Jeremy Corbyn. How do you deal with populist revolts? Conflict. Meaning, leftists tend to not necessarily be reactionary. They don't necessarily just jump the gun and go into this idea of military conflict as being their first thought. That being said, in politics, being strong is often considered this idea of leadership. But being strong is also considered to be this thing of brute force. Meaning a short, ham-handed way to make it look as if you're being muscular and strong for your population is to do things that are somewhat muscular and strong. Now granted, those things tend to backfire. Those things tend to blow back. But you're not looking for the reality of it. You're looking for the optics of it. Theresa May doing this is to appear strong. The reality of it is completely irrational from the standpoint of actually getting anything done and actually making sure Britain is secure. If she was being honest, and if she was being earnest, and if the results of what she found is actually the results of what she found, it should be held up for scrutiny. What Moscow is asking for is, show us your evidence. Show us what you're using to incriminate or to indict us. That's not insane. That's the most rational thing in the world. And anybody who is accused of a crime would want to be able to face the person who's accusing them and evaluate the evidence that's being used to accuse them. That's just good goddamn sense. So, my point in this, they use this to attack the left. Because the left is rational on this approach, you're talking to contrasting views. This particular view of, we're doing something to protect you, and those guys out there don't want to do anything. Now, the fact is, the approach of saying, well, wait a minute, you're doing something to protect us for something where we don't even know what we need to be protected against. You're acting, but are you acting in the best interest? Or are you doing this for political effect? I will make the point that she's doing this in part for political effect. I'm just saying. Have an investigation. Figure out who did it. From the standpoint of the British population, be skeptical. There were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. I lived through that. You guys lived through that. Your government, Washington, D.C., and your parliament lied. They outright lied. Now, they're in this Russia hysteria here in the United States. Don't allow them to let that spread to the UK. Be very skeptical of your government. Be very skeptical of your media. Governments lie. Governments lie. In fact, they use this war stuff, and they use this idea of a threat in order to carry favor. For whatever reason, populations have a tendency to lean right when they believe they're under threat. My point here is don't let them do that. They're trying to undermine Jeremy Corbyn with this nonsense. What Jeremy Corbyn is saying here is right. Anybody else who's pushing this Russia nonsense, they have to get over that bar of there's been no investigation. There's been no investigation. You guys have jumped into fucking conclusions. In an anthrax case, they went through person after person after person, and one person after the next was exonerated. They were getting it wrong. They were getting it wrong. They don't know technically what they're talking about. All I'm saying is, if they're right, they should be able to prove that they're right. So, that's my only point. Let's see. Anybody here? I still don't believe the final answer in the anthrax report. When you point the finger 3 points back at an accuser, yeah, that's a little weird, right? They kept saying this guy, this guy, this guy. They didn't know. They didn't know. And now the UK is like, well, they've had this thing in Russia, so Russia has to be the culprit. What? What? It's like, because they did something at a particular location, that means the person is culprit. How do you know they didn't do the same thing in the United States? How do you know they weren't doing that? How do you even know? In the same way that they were talking about blowing up a ship in Cuba in order to point to Cubans, killing actual Cubans in order to pull this off. How do you know? That's all I'm getting at. Governments lie. Governments do some really despicable shit sometimes, especially if you're talking about the CIA. How do you know? That needs to be held up to scrutiny. Look, we are in a world where these edifices around us, government, media, those things have been delegitimized. But they've delegitimized themselves. It hasn't been necessarily anything that the public has done to delegitimize them. One case after the next, they've been wrong. And the media has assiduously reported the wrong thing, getting the public into hysteria. Right now, at this moment, they've been monetized to talk about Russia and the Russia hysteria. Prior, it was Vietnam. Prior, Spanish-American War. I mean, prior, Libya, us doing the air power thing. And then after the fact, acting like it was this kind of great success. They're fucking selling slaves in that country. They pull you into these conflicts. But they pull you into these things through lies. I'm just saying, be skeptical of your government. Be skeptical of your media, especially when they're trying to get you to the point of being hostile to somebody else. That's all I'm saying. That's my basic point. All right, guys. I have a few more of these that I'm going to do. So I'm going to end this one. I don't want it to be too long. And I will jump to the next. All right, guys. I'll see you in 5-10 minutes. Thanks, guys.